Thirsty for action? Let's crack open the Sunday six-pack.
We'll open up the six-pack once again. Sides, totals, props, whatever. Only thing is we have to have at least one side. So we'll do that again. 73-66, you're up. And I'll just give the lines for each of the four games up top. There's one game that's not going to be in the six-pack. We'll talk about that after the six-pack, but still want to give everybody the lines as we record this in the middle of the week. Houston at Baltimore. Ravens favored by 9.5. The total 43.5 at BetMGM. Packers at the Niners. Niners favored by 9.5. The total 50.5. The Bucks at the Lions. Lions favored by 6.5 with a total of 48.5. And then Chiefs at Bills. Bills favored by 3 at BetMGM. The total 45.5. All right, Stuck, you're up first. Let's crack open our divisional round six-pack.
All right, for my first pick and the first overall of the divisional round weekend six-pack, I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens first half minus 6.5 at home against the Houston Texans. I'll start off by saying just unbelievable performance by the Texans last week. Stroud was awesome. Flacco was not. But, I think there's a little bit of recency bias in this line. I think it should be at least 10. But overall, and I'll explain why I like the first half a little bit more than the side spread as I go on here. But I went into last weekend saying that the Browns are extremely overrated. Like the Browns are, I don't know why everyone's fell in love with them. It's still 38-year-old Joe Flacco. They played a bunch of backups at the end of the year. And their defense, which was banged up, is not the same defense that it was earlier in the year. And their defense on the road, again, gets shredded, as it did all year. They finished 9-0 on the season, or 10-0 on the season in road overs, which is pretty crazy. But so it's not like I adjusted Houston astronomically after that game. It's still one game. And this is a Texans team, specifically from a defensive standpoint. And look, their offense, love Stroud. I love their game. They were aggressive throwing early, which I liked. But this is a wide receiver room now. Doesn't have Noah Brown, doesn't have Tank Dell. And now you're going up against the best defense in the NFL that played a top 5 schedule this year. And there's really no weaknesses here. I think that, and look, you have the Ravens off a bye, well rested. Whereas the Texans, I mean, you're dealing with injuries, not only wide receivers, particularly on the defensive end. They're not fully healthy in the secondary. And now you have, questions at defensive end. Will Anderson, they're just not fully healthy. I'm assuming that, Hughes might not play, but I'm assuming Anderson and Goddard are going to play, but they didn't practice today. This defense isn't fully healthy. And, indoor team going outdoors in what's going to be frigid temperatures. But from a matchup perspective, Ravens and Harbaugh always good off of a bye. And I think it's super beneficial for this staff in particular. The coordinators have been so good. What do I think that we'll see here as a result? I think that you'll see the Ravens come out pretty pass heavy early on. That's the weakness of this Texans defense by far. And I think that you're going to see on defense, you're going to have, you have Mike McDonald who's had weeks to prepare for this game. You're going to have a lot of different looks to confuse Stroud, different pressures. I think you're going to go a little bit man heavier. Zone. Stroud absolutely shredded zone throughout this year. Wasn't nowhere close to as good versus man or under pressure, which I think we'll see both of this week. I think we'll see, a lot of man on the outside, but also simulated pressure, some different blitzes just to confuse them into a mistake or two. And then Lamar Jackson against this defense, if they come out pass heavy, this is a defense that doesn't blitz a lot. And that's really been one of the ways that you could, Lamar's numbers against anything have been great this year, but he struggled at times against the blitz. Against zone, which the Texans run a bunch of, it's been ridiculous what Lamar has done against zone. 71% completion rate, 0.1 EPA per dropback, 51% success rate, which is just stupid. Also has a much higher success rate and scramble rate against zone. People think like, oh, if you play zone, that'll stop Lamar from scrambling. But he's just so fast, it doesn't matter, right? Like against some other mobile quarterbacks, if you play man, you're going to get burnt by the scramble. But, you got Mark Andrews now, full practice. He's back. So I think this Ravens offense is going to come out with a really good game plan. I think they're going to confuse Stroud early. And this Ravens team, look, if you just look at the body of work for each team, the Texans in their last 10 games have faced one playoff quarterback, Joe Flacco. That was it. This is a team that played one offense all year that finished in the top 10 in EPA per play. That was the Ravens in week 1 of a new scheme. Offense, we saw how much better the offense got, even just after the first few weeks. And they lost that game 25-9. They didn't face a single top 10 offense the rest of the way. Didn't really face many mobile quarterbacks. I mean, you had Kyler, who ran pretty well against them in a close game, but that was for the Cardinals. Meanwhile, the Ravens against playoff teams this year, 6-2 if you remove the backup game at the end, beat them by an average of 15 points per game. Better special teams here. And you have two cash cows in Lamar and Harbaugh in the first halves. Past 20 years, most profitable quarterback in the first half against the spread. Lamar Jackson, 50, 25-2, 67%. He's covering by 3 points per game on average over a 75 game sample size in the first half, 3 points. And then Harbaugh, first half, most profitable coach against the spread over the past 20 years, 148, 103, and 8, talking 250 game sample size, 59%. You'd say, okay, there's some, overlap there. Remove Lamar from Harbaugh. Harbaugh 98, 78, and 6 against the spread, 56% against the spread in the first half. For example, like 7-2 with Huntley starting in the first half. What that speaks to is you have that Lamar, first of all, really good staff, usually. They're really well prepared, even more so now with extra time off and the healthier team. And then you have that Lamar adjustment of like getting used to his speed, for a team that's not like they're in their division. They haven't seen many mobile quarterbacks. The last time I saw them was in week 1. It's a defense that's banged up. It's a good matchup for the Ravens offense. And the Ravens defense can kind of cater what they do each week based on the matchup. So I think they can force Stroud into some mistakes. And it's just not a fully healthy wide receiver room. I mean, I would love to see Stroud with like Dell, Brown, Collins, and his full arsenal of weapons here go up against the Ravens D. But I think you get a focused Ravens effort after some time off, and there's some matchup advantages here. And then just the past success of Lamar and Harbaugh in the first half. I like them anything under a touchdown in the first half.
Just curious, what do you feel like? How do you feel like the second half is going to play out between these two teams? Because, first half, obviously, you're technically paying a tax because, the full game line is 9.5. The first game line is 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, I played 5.5. It's gone up a bit. I still like it at 6.5, but the Ravens have a tendency to like kind of play with their food late, and then they say, okay, let's rely just on our defense, and it's still Stroud, and like I could just see a Texans back door pretty easily in this game. And there's just it's the playoffs. There's no reason to win by margin. You're going to have the Chiefs or Bills next week. It's let's keep everyone healthy. This total is coming down a bit. It's going to be freezing cold. I'm probably going to play some Ravens for the full game as well. I know for certain I am at under 10, but I like the first half a bit more. Remove the backdoor risk, and the Ravens just like they sometimes they just play around with their with a team and kind of let them back in it in the second half. And I have a lot of respect for Stroud, so I like the Ravens full game too. But if I had to choose between the two, it's the first half. I just think the Ravens are going to come out here. There's huge advantages to take advantage of this Houston defense, which plays just a scheme that is not conducive to stopping Lamar Jackson in this offense. And then on the other side of the ball, I just the Texans maybe they can make some adjustments, but I have so much respect for McDonald. This is another reason why I like the first half. I have so much respect for McDonald, and I've seen every week his game plan cater to who they're playing. So, they might go like really man heavy, really zone heavy, or they'll use different looks. And it's one of the most versatile, flexible schemes in the NFL. And I think that advantage is biggest early on in the game. So we'll see if Stroud and company can adjust, but I think there's a good chance that you get like an early Stroud mistake. The crowd is going to be insane. So yeah, I like both, but those are some of the reasons why I like the first half instead.
For my first pick in the second overall of the divisional round 6-pack, I'm going Devin Singletary under 16.5 receiving yards. And I think this might be a little bit of a market overcorrection for the fact that Noah Brown went on IR, but he didn't really play much in that last game anyway. And Houston has had receivers out all year. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to target their backs more in this game. Singletary's had 13 or fewer receiving yards in 15 of 18 games. That's 83%. So I think the reason Books bumped him up is a combination of, the receivers being banged up, but also he's been playing over the last 2 weeks on about 72% of the team's pass snaps. However, last week, it was a blowout. And in general, Singletary, he'll play a little more when they're leading because he's not their third down, hurry up kind of back. So in a game script where you're projected to be down by more than one score, it's going to be more of Ogunbowale, who plays 2-minute, who plays third down. Only 3 of Singletary's 38 targets, 8%, have come on third or fourth down this year, and only 8% have come with less than 2 minutes to go in either half. And then you got Roquan Smith is one of the linebackers. He grades out top 5 in coverage at PFF with an 84.1 grade, 5th out of 80 qualified linebackers. Patrick Queen, 15th out of 80 qualifiers with a 76.1 coverage grade. And again, Singletary's only gone over 13, 3 of his 18 games this season. So I think this line is a little bit high. I'm sure it'll come down. I would bet the under 213.5. So hopefully by the time you're listening to this, you could still get that. But I think this number is too high because, again, if Houston is trailing and it is garbage time, I think you're going to see a lot more Ogunbowale. That's kind of what happened in the first game. Houston lost by 16. Dameon Pierce at this point was a starter, but if you just look at him and Singletary combined, Singletary didn't get any targets in that game because he was the number 2 back behind Pierce. But Pierce, 3 targets, 2 catches, 9 yards. Boone, who was the Ogunbowale role, had 4 targets, 3 catches for 18 yards. So that's what I kind of would expect this week. I think, Singletary, if you have to pick between him and Schultz, it's going to be him staying in a block a little bit more in this game if the pass rush is giving him an issue. They do give him screens about 2/3 of his games. He has 12 screens, but he only averages 5 yards a catch on screen passes. So that's not going to destroy us, obviously, unless they break one, but that's true about any catch. So like Singletary under 16.5 receiving yards for my number 1 pick.
Question for you just before we move on to another game about this, about a prop, because I'm sure people are going to be wondering about Mark Andrews. So what are you assuming for his? Are you assuming he's all the way back, halfway back? So what are your snap projections for Andrews? I mean, I saw something like it looked like he was probably going to be. I mean, I would assume he's going to be overvalued, but what are you doing with Andrews?
Right now, I still have it like 50-50 with him and Likely because I think, if he's back, it might be something where he plays in like obvious passing downs and third downs in third down, red zone, all those kind of things. But with Baltimore being a 9.5-point favorite, that projection becomes a little more volatile. If we're talking about Houston and projecting this, we think they're going to pass a lot more, but a lot of Baltimore's passes could come on early downs if they're leading. So I think as far as I usually do it by, the snap projections. Like I'm not necessarily making Andrews less efficient because he's coming back. But snap wise, I would have it, his normal route participation for the season, he would be at around 85% and likely would be, around 15%. Right now, I have it 50-50. As we get more news, maybe I'll bump that up and have Andrews closer to his normal. But as of right now, I don't know that we can really project Andrews to just go back right into his normal role.
Yeah. Another thing to mention is that for the first half, like you might get, a heavy, if Andrews is good to go, you might get a heavy dose of him early. If you were able to build a lead, it's an ankle injury, some re-injury risk. So another reason for the first half is then, if you're up, you might shift that percentage of snaps to likely as the game goes on if you have a decent lead. But let me move on to my second pick and the third overall of the divisional round weekend 6-pack. I'm going to go with a Tampa Bay Buck over longest receptions. It's not Cade Otton, unfortunately. It is Chris Godwin over 21.5 yards. I'm playing him over yards too, but let me break this down. I actually think people that are waiting for the Otton, that Otton last week helps us here. And the reason for that is just like, oh, wow, Cade Otton had a huge game. He's not that good. But, so the Lions got to be a little bit more cognizant of him after watching that, right? It's like, all right, maybe we have to pay a little bit more attention. But mainly, there's two reasons why I really like this. One, the Bucs last week, huge advantages going up against the Eagles secondary. Can't cover anybody. Was afraid that, at times they get a little too run heavy and they're not a good running team. They came out and just threw the ball. 75-80% neutral pass game rate. Yeah, very high. And then if you look back at the first matchup, the score is very misleading because Baker Mayfield missed a ton of I'm talking wide open. I think he missed 3 wide open guys way downfield. 33, I think, almost a third of Baker Mayfield's throws were 20 plus yards downfield. That's as high as, you'll see in any game of any quarterback. So they were throwing it downfield. So I have a lot of confidence that they're going to come out with a pass-heavy game script. Also, they're underdogs here. So the most likely scenarios are going to be playing from behind. But I'm confident they're going to be throwing it a lot. And, they're going up against a Lions secondary that's given up the 4th most yards to receivers. But this is all, and this game is also indoors. Baker Mayfield looked healthier. Bucs play a lot of games outdoors. This is a fast track. The other thing is this is mainly a fade of Vildor, who I think is one of the worst corners in the league. I've said it since he came into the league. He's allowing 22.8 yards per reception. The next worst, if you just take minimum 100 coverage snaps. It's been 151 corners who have played 100 coverage snaps this year. The next worst is 17.7. He's 5 yards, almost over 5 yards worse than the next worst corner. He gets burnt consistently. There's going to be opportunities for Godwin to expose us. Why do I think it's Godwin? Well, there's one of two things that's going to happen here. You might have Sutton shadow Evans. They've used Sutton as a shadow sometimes. I don't know if they're going to do it or not. You never really know what the game plan is going to be. But that's one option. If that's the case, you're going to have Vildor on Godwin. If they don't, then you'll have Vildor on the left side, and that's where Godwin lines up more often when he goes out wide. And his slot snaps have gone down the past couple of weeks. He's also, I think he's gone over this number. He's had catches of at least 20.5 yards, or at least 21.5, I should say. 15 out of 18 games this season. So not quite every game, but like I said, this is a bad pass date. This is indoors. The game script should favor it, and I expect him to come out and be very pass heavy. Baker Mayfield's also healthy, and he's going up again. He's going to get a lot of matchups against what I perceive to be one of the worst corners in the league. The safety help isn't great either. So I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunities. And I like Godwin over yards too, but there's going to be multiple opportunities for him to break one. He might get, he could have a 60, 70-yard broken reception. And I think he's going to get the more favorable matchups more often. Bucs are going to come out pass heavy here. So, yeah, and maybe a little bit more attention with the safeties to Otten. Maybe that helps, and the safety just hesitates a little bit. But I like Godwin to have a big day here. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and it's going to actually relate to my next prop, but I think the key is Godwin has played less slot snaps as of late. He is lining up more outside. And I think the strongest, Lions pass defense, when you talk about wide receivers, is going to be in the slot, because you got Branch there. I guess CJ Gardner-Johnson you could put there. Like, you have more options, where I think the outside is really, where your weakness is. So I do, I'll talk about the Bucs. I do agree. I think the Bucs have some matchup advantages throwing the football. But I think when you're looking at Godwin, he's the guy that kind of stands out in this matchup. Otten could still have a good game. They'll still have.
I like Otten a good game too.
Yeah.
It's just that his last week against a team that cannot cover tight ends at all. It's not like the Lions are great, but I mean, the way that the Eagles, the roster was at the end of the year with Patricia Law, I got 20.5. It's like,
right.
It's like 31 now. So yeah, after last week, you're definitely paying a premium on Otten, but I think he definitely could have another good game.
Well, let me get right into my next pick, because it's going to kind of be the inverse of that. There is a premium right now on a guy, and for my second pick, the 4th overall of the divisional round 6-pack, I'm going Trey Palmer under 20.5 receiving yards. And I think you're paying a premium here if you're looking to bet the over on Palmer. Obviously, he had that great 56-yard touchdown. A shout out to Nick Giffen, who was on his anytime touchdown, and I know made a lot of people a lot of money with that hit. But when you look at what Trey Palmer's been doing, number one, he's been playing fewer slot snaps, and that affected just his overall playing time last week. He ran a route on a season low 33% of team dropbacks. David Moore, a season high 42%. So, we were kind of watching that game, and I was saying to our guy Matthew Treby, it looked like Moore kind of overtook Palmer a little bit in the game plan, and it could be a 1-week thing, but even if you look at the entire season, Trey Palmer has been under 20 yards, held to 20 yards or less in 10 of his 18 games, 21 yards or less in 11 of his 18 games. And now you're looking at a situation where, Palmer is still going to run, 40 to 50% of his snaps in the slot. So he'll still face, their toughest corner in Branch a good amount, but he could just go back to that same snap rate that he had last week. And if he doesn't get that 56-yarder, he finishes the game with no catches no catches for no yards in that game on one target. So I think this is a good time to sell high on Palmer. Big plays are volatile. And even though he hasn't been playing in the slot quite as much, he still has a single-digit average depth of target in 7 of his last 9 games. Earlier in the season, that was about 50-50, whether you would have, a A-dot over or under 10. For the season, his average A-dot is actually 11. So this is another one where, you could get hurt by a big play, but it's unlikely to hit a big play like that 2 weeks in a row. And David Moore has kind of cut into Palmer's role a bit. And Moore had a good game too, but it wasn't just Palmer. Palmer obviously took advantage of just terrible Philly tackling and angles and all that stuff on that 56-yarder. But for the season, this is a plus EV bet. And for this game, I think it's even more, because you have the built-in upside, I guess you could call it, of, Palmer playing on well under 50% of the pass snaps yet again. And then on top of that, I think the market is a little bit low on the Bucs. And so there's a better chance, I think, for positive game script than the line is kind of indicating too. So that's actually could be worth a yard or two as well, because you're expecting maybe a little bit less passing in garbage time, or just passing period, really, in this game, if the Bucs are at the line that I think they should be at in the market. So give me Trey Palmer under 20.5 receiving yards against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, and most, I think they're gonna kick out Godwin even more to than they have been recently.
Mm-hmm.
And a majority of Palmer's snaps have come in the slot this year. It's not like an overwhelming majority, but
It's just over 50.
And that would, like we just talked about, that's where you get the best from a Detroit perspective, the best cover options going up against them. So, and I think that he might, if he is in there, if they're going to get even a higher percentage of snaps to Godwin on the outside, then he's not going to have favorable matchups as well in the slot. So that could add to it as well. All right, for my third pick and the fifth overall of the divisional round Sunday 6-pack, I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers -9.5 against the Green Bay Packers. I think that there's a little bit of recency bias here for what Green Bay looked like last week. Jordan Love's been amazing. We've talked about it, how good he's been since week 11. He was great last week as well. We were all on the Packers last week, but this is a Green Bay team. Can we remember that the defense is still horrendous? This is not a good defense in any stretch. And I talked about this last week. We both were on the Packers. Would have been one of my picks in the 6-pack. It was one of yours. I actually kind of liked a little bit of the matchup for the Green Bay defense because Dallas hasn't run the ball efficiently all year. And that's not going to be an issue with San Francisco, the best rushing offense in the NFL, against this Green Bay D that vulnerable against their run. They can't cover the middle of the field. They can't cover backs, can't cover tight ends. They can't cover the slot. All of the ingredients that you would want when when you're about to face San Francisco off extra rest, extra preparation. I'm sure the script is going to be great for San Francisco. They're also going to be the healthier team, the more well-rested team. They should get Armstead back. I'm almost positive they're going to get Armstead back on the defensive line. Now you finally have that defensive line fully healthy. And I think they'll be able to generate some pressure up the middle, which I think you want to do against Jordan Love. But, Greenlaw back, Armstead back, fully healthy D now. And look, Packers, Love has been great. They cooked the Cowboys. A lot of that was on Love. A lot of that was on, the Dak mistakes, the play calling, the coaching, some of the things that from a game plan perspective, Dallas was just left in the dust as far as personnel. They wouldn't adjust. And I don't think that's going to be an issue here. We have to remember this is a Packers team that, look, if you look over the last 3 weeks, they beat, they lost to Tommy DeVito. They lost to the Steelers. They beat up on some bad teams. And if you look, this Green Bay defense, which is 27th DVOA, is it getting better? No, 28th weighted. Told you all the things that they can't cover, which is where San Fran excels in. They also played an extremely easy schedule of opposing offenses. That's not adjusting for the fact they played DeVito. They played a game against the Vikings with Jaron Hall. And they played the Rams, who are considered a good offense, when Brett Rippon started. So their defensive metrics benefited from playing the Rams with Brett Rippon. If you adjust for that, this was a bottom 2-3 defense in the league against one of the easiest schedules in the league. It's just hard for me to see them getting many stops. And, I just think that this is a little bit of inflation. I think this line should be over 10. Playoffs, you're not going to get huge side edges. It's not like I think this line should be 14. But I think San Fran's going to come up. They're going to come out, the great script. They're going to get a lead at home. They're going to be able to get some pressure with a fully healthy defense now, force Green Bay into some mistakes. It's just, I keep looking at this game and I get deja vu because I remember when we were doing this podcast in 2019, I think I had a Packers 50-1, 40-1. I don't know I forget the price, but I had my only Super Bowl future was a Packers future, and they were going to San Francisco. You had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, but they couldn't stop the run, and I was like, they're going to get ripped apart, and they did. And I feel like nothing has changed with these teams, and I just can't see many paths for this Green Bay defense to get stops. I think San Francisco is just going to go up and down the field at will. If they want to run it, if they want to throw it, it's hard for me to see this Green Bay defense getting many stops. And by the way, Green Bay also has one of the worst special teams units in the entire NFL. You're a completely unreliable kicker, but they've been bad across the board. So it's like we're the team that's been the most dominant in the NFL all season, off a bye at home with huge advantages on offense, now a healthier defense. You're basically just saying, like, Jordan Love, keep this within a touchdown. And he's been great since week 11. But I think we've gone a little bit too far overboard based on last week's performance. So I'm selling the Packers after last week. It's funny you see these swings. Everyone, not anyone who listens to this podcast or us, but the Cowboys were an overwhelming public side. Now everyone wants to jump off, and no one wanted to take the 7.5 at Dallas. Now everyone wants to take the 9.5 at San Francisco. San Francisco's been significantly better than Dallas, and this is a much better matchup. And they're coming off of a bye at home. And look, again, like I said, the Packers have been good, but can we remember since week 11, they beat the Chiefs in that amazing spot. Like I had that spot circled before the year. They lost to Tommy DeVito. They got blown out by the Bucs. They held on to beat the Panthers. The Panthers scored 30 on them, by the way. It took the Panthers. If you line the Panthers up against all the other playoff teams, and they just played one each week, how long would it take them to score 30 total points? 6 months. Then they beat the Vikings. They blew out the Vikings with Jaron Hall starting and Nick Mullins, and then they beat the Bears. I think we have to cool our jets based on just one game against the Cowboys. I'm taking the Niners here, -9.5 at home.
Yeah, I have this line right about where the market does, so not as much of an edge for me, but all the points make sense. This probably is the time to sell on Green Bay. I am a little worried they could, keep up offensively. We've kind of been seeing that in the playoffs. The theme is, these offenses that are playing well have kind of won the day, and some of the defenses, Cleveland comes to mind. I mean, although they were bad on the road, but I do think this Green Bay offense is humming right now and could give the Niners some issues. But yeah, I agree. I think the Niners on that Green Bay defense, they're going to go up and down the field. Don't love betting totals.
I think Green Bay offense is going to have some success.
Yeah,
I think Green Bay's offense is going to have some success for sure, but it's a bottom 5D versus a top 5D. So like San Francisco is going to get a couple more stops, maybe force a couple more field goals. And then because of how they can run it, once they get a lead, so San Francisco's problem sometimes when you're laying these big numbers, although it hasn't been the case this year, but in the past with Shanahan, is he'll get too conservative. And he'll kick like field goals on like 4th and 1. Talk about this with McVay. It's the whole Shanahan tree, going back to Shanahan's dad. So Shanahan can get a little bit too conservative. And even if they have advantages in the passing game, they don't run it too much. And then they kind of just like, hey, let's hold on to the lead. That's fine here. That's fine. If you're just handing it off to McCaffrey and your backs with a lead, they're still going to move up and down the field. So, yeah, I also thought about Kittle, but it's really high. But I don't know. The Packers can't cover tight ends. I mean, it's bad. What if Ferguson had 3 touchdowns? The lost and all that. Ferguson had 3 touchdowns last week and like 90 yards. But the Packers have been horrendous against tight ends, back, slot, middle of the field. So, yeah, I think San Francisco should cook here. And Jordan Love has been great. And it really doesn't matter who's even out there, that receiver or tight end. And he's going to hit some plays. They're going to score some points. But I think San Francisco is going to get like 3 or 4 more stops, and that's the difference. And then once they get the lead, they can run it and will still be successful moving the ball up and down the field.
All right. For my third pick, the 6th and final of the divisional round 6-pack, going with the Tampa Bay Bucks plus 6.5 at the Detroit Lions. So a few things here. Number one, the Bucks have been playing better as of late. Heading into that game last week, they were up to 15th in weighted overall DVOA. So an above average team, Detroit 7th. Tampa Bay last week outgained Philadelphia 426 to 234. Detroit got outgained by the Rams at home 425 to 334. So by nearly 100 yards. And then we know what Todd Bowles and his Bucs defense is going to do. Knew it was going to be a problem against knew the Eagles were going to struggle with it, and that's the blitz. And this Detroit team, it hasn't been as bad as Jalen Hurts, but Jared Goff he's a top-graded passer when he's not blitzed at PFF with a 90.4 grade. He drops to 22nd against the blitz with a 70.3 grade. So I think this Tampa Bay defense and its blitz happiness is going to work to its advantage here. You look at Detroit's defense, they're actually grayed out worse than Tampa Bay in weighted DVOA, but also pass funnel defense. Number 1 against the run, 16th against the pass. It really doesn't matter if you're number 1 against the run against Tampa Bay because they've been the worst rushing team in the league for the better part of 2 years now. So I don't think that's a big edge for them. I think Detroit's still exploitable on the back end. Mayfield's been a lot better against pressure lately. He's just been locked in. And while this isn't a home game for Mayfield, it is an indoor game. So just kind of like Tampa Bay at home, not really conditions. Huh?
Is it an indoor game?
Right, yeah. What did they ask Todd Bowles that?
Bowles, how he's preparing the team to deal with
for the frigid Detroit weather, right? Yeah, all right. Well, Earth to whoever asked that question. Yeah.
And he's like, well, we have to be outside for 20 seconds walking from the bus to the stadium, so no plans. We have no plans for any weather preparation.
Todd Bowles, by the way, also in a year where I feel like a lot of coaches have just been terrible, Todd Bowles has kind of managed to stay out of the news. He's like, it hasn't been amazing, but he hasn't made those like terrible errors or just, completely had his team, shit the bed or anything like that.
Last week, I think that what you're saying now is like the Bucs, they can't run it. Detroit's run D has been very good. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things I was worried about with Tampa last week. And they showed me that they understood the assignment and they didn't run. They didn't try to run. In neutral game states, they were coming out and they came out firing. Showed me that the scout was good and it worked. So you're very likely to look at this matchup again. And it's even more drastic because the Eagles' run D kind of had fallen off. So I agree. I think that they're going to come out, and Mayfield looked healthy too because he was banged up to end the year. I mean, he could ribs and knee. So I think that I'm very confident that they're going to come out and not just, because this would happen at times. It happened more with Leftwich, but they would come out and just run into walls, and then they'd get, it'd be 3rd and long, and and then they'd get behind, and it was just such an inefficient approach. So after seeing what they did last week, I agree. I was extremely impressed with Bowles, and then just the staff, which at the scout, which I think will work. Just run that back here this week because there's huge advantages. I mean, you have we talked about Vildor potentially on Godwin a lot, and then if they shadow Sutton, people think Sutton is good. I was like, Sutton is not good. Lions fans tell me in one of our podcast reviews, someone's like, he said, or it was a YouTube comment. He says Cam Sutton is trash. I'm never listening to this guy again. So yeah, Evans on Sutton and Godwin on Vildor, and then Kate Otten to God just on no one can cover him. So there's major advantages when Mayfield drops back, and I'm pretty confident that's the approach they're going to take.
And there's some other things that work in Tampa Bay's favor here a little bit too. This team, Baker Mayfield at quarterback, I think that's the reason. Casual better look at say, oh my goodness, that's terrible. He's been playing well, but also this is a Tampa Bay team that's besides Mayfield, it's playoff tested. I mean, you still have a lot of the guys that went to the Super Bowl. You have a lot of the guys, they've won the division each of the last few years, or they've been or before that they were in the playoffs. They were losing to the Saints for the division, but this is that same kind of team here. So it's not like this team is just a whole bunch of new guys who haven't been in this position before. Mayfield's won a couple playoff games now for his career. So, if anything, Detroit, Ford Field is going to be great. The home field is still going to work in Detroit's favor, obviously, but it's another one of those situations where I think the market is just undervaluing Tampa Bay. As far as trends go, Sunday divisional round, single-digit road dogs, 26-9-1 against the spread over the last 2 decades. That's 74%. And wild card or divisional dogs who are underperforming the Pythagorean win-loss record from the regular season, which the Bucs, they are slightly, not by a major amount, but they little over 9 wins for them. If you just look at their point differential, and they end up going 9-8. Those teams, 35-13-2, 73% against the spread over the last 2 decades. That was a stat I cited on Convince Me back in the Bucs last week as well. So had the Lions the first time in this matchup, actually, and they did cover. So hopefully I can stay hot with picking the right side of this one, because I'm going with the Bucs this time, plus 6.5 at the Lions.
Yeah, and I will say you cashed that probably the right side, but I'm telling you, I watched that entire game. Mayfield missed 2 or 3. There was an 80-yard touchdown he missed.
Yep.
But there was a couple just wide open guys, which is going to happen against the Lions. So that game could have been a lot closer. Very misleading final score if you're going back and just looking at how that played out, and you're like, wow, they only scored 6 or 7 points. I forget what it was. The one thing that worries me is I think both offenses have some advantages here. And I know Campbell is going to be aggressive on 4th down. And we said how Bowles been better this year. He's still not aggressive. He's still on 4th and shorts. He's still very conservative. I think, I forget who put out the most aggressive coaches of 2023 this year, but Campbell was either 1 or 2, as you would expect. And Bowles is still, bottom 3rd of the league. So I hope that he is a little bit more aggressive here. But that's one thing that worries me, is just like the Bucs punting on like 4th and 1 at like the 43 or 4th and 2. And then on the other side, the Lions go for it, in the same situation, end up with a touchdown. Those are just big swings. So I hope Bowles is a little bit more aggressive, because I know Campbell's going to be, and I think this is a good game to do so. But I like it. I think this line's too high. I have this at like 4.8.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for our divisional round 6-pack. But just to recap, Stuck has Baltimore first half minus 6.5. Chris Godwin, longest reception, over 21.5. And the Niners minus 9.5 against the Pack. I have Devin Singletary under 16.5 receiving yards. Trey Palmer under 20.5 receiving yards. And the Bucs plus 6.5.